Welcome to the Is It Just Me podcast with Jess and Luke, the show dedicated to diving into your F1 opinions. Now, last weekend, we saw the Spanish Grand Prix, the 6th round of the 2020 season, and unlike the races before it, it was somewhat boring as hell.
Yeah, basically.
Is that
it was the somewhat that I was thinking. That's maybe a little bit soft, but yeah, it just wasn't very good, was it?
It was just, I guess, because we were spoilt with the opening round in Austria. The second round in Austria was also good. I feel like we've had some really good races. Yeah. For different reasons, and then we got to Spain and everyone was like, oh yes, you know, it's hot again. Mercedes struggle with the heat. You know, we had the Pirelli situation in Silverstone as well. Like, people didn't seem to be able to manage their tyres properly, and it gave us a bit of unpredictability. And then we had the race. Yeah. And it all just came swimming back to Mercedes, and they seemingly got rid of all their tyre issues. Or, well, as we're going to get onto, the reasons behind why maybe that race was so dull. But it's something that has kind of always followed the Spanish Grand Prix around for years now. And I guess there was a part of the F1 community that really rejoiced when Spain looked to be cut from the 2020.
I'd include myself in that,
really?
Actually. Yeah, I would. Yeah, I really would.
But yet, here we are.
And it just keeps coming back. There was a sort of a joke sort of saying, like, even like a global pandemic, even that can't kill the Spanish Grand Prix, that it just keeps coming back and keeps coming back. And it's kind of true, just because it is one of these races that we're going to get into that just every year you're just a bit like, at the end of it. And that's not what you want from F1. You want it to be exciting. You want tracks that produce good racing. And I know you can't have it all, but every year Spain just seems to be a bit of a bit average, really, in every way.
Bit average. So yeah. Obviously, the whole point of this podcast is we're going to try and drill into why is the Spanish Grand Prix so crap. And we are going to kick off with, obviously on Twitter, there was a lot of discussion as to why this race isn't particularly good. There seem to be two main areas that people point to as to why the Spanish Grand Prix maybe isn't as good as other races that we have on the calendar. And that is the track itself, but also the cars. But the topic that we're going to kick off with, or the opinion we're going to kick off with, is it just me, or are the cars the problem, not the circuit, the Barcelona-Catalunya? Now, that's quite an interesting one, because I think definitely on Twitter on Sunday, everyone was just like, will you just axe this track already? Bring back Jerez, bring back Valencia, you know, bring back any Spanish track we possibly can, just absolutely kick Barcelona, Catalunya into next Sunday. Do you know what? Or not next Sunday.
No Sundays.
Just no
ever.
Sundays. No more racing Sundays at this track. Now, but this person who we're going to kick off with, we have audio from this person as to why they think this. They're actually saying that, you know, the track. Why are we pointing fingers at the track? What did the track ever do to us? Is it not the cars that are the issue? So let's hear from ALDAS, who sent us in this audio message.
I don't think that Catalunya is a bad track per se. It certainly looks beautiful. I'd love to go and see Formula 1 cars go around that track one day. However, I don't think it's a great track for Grand Prix racing specifically, but I feel like it's somewhere in the middle, and there's more to its lackluster racing, especially in the past few years, than just the bad track that everyone talks about. I think we have to look deeper into Formula 1, and I feel like there's more of a fundamental issue with where Formula 1 is at the moment, because even when you look at the last race, within 10 laps, Max Verstappen was on the radio to his team saying about how slowly Lewis Hamilton, the leader of the race, was driving. So in your head, you should imagine, well, this is racing, this is Formula 1, just drive alongside him, overtake him with a great move and win the race. But he can't. The cars are too wide. He needs to manage his tyres. He needs to manage his engine as well, the wear on his engine, because we're so limited these days that it's just almost not worth it to try and push and overtake if you really don't have like a 2-second delta quicker than the car ahead of you. So, and that's just so wrong when you think about it, because that's not racing. This is not Formula 1 tyre management world championship. This is the Formula 1 World Championship, and that is why I think there is a much more fundamental issue that is compounded with some mediocre tracks alongside it. So, yeah, I mean, of course, we all hope that it's going to be solved by the 2022 rule changes, but if it's not, then I think Liberty Media are going to be under some serious pressure.
There we go. Well, thank you, ALDAS. And ALDAS actually has his own YouTube channel, so make sure you go check that out. It's ALDAS over on YouTube. But so ALDAS is saying, it's the cars. It's the fact that we've got too much wake, we've got too much time management needing, you can't follow. And this is something that I think is a topic that a lot of people have discussed over the past few years because of the aero regs. But I don't know, what was your take on that? It seemed quite a considered opinion.
Definitely.
He raised a load of good points there. You know, we have seen, especially in Spain, you do have to manage tyres particularly well and can't follow through the corners. But is that what's the problem here?
I think he does raise some excellent points there, and I think this generation of cars, I mean, every sort of new regulation cycle that comes out, it's kind of like there's always something a little bit more added to them. And Lewis Hamilton has always spoken about the weight of the cars, and he says when he started it was sort of like 550, 600 kilos or something, and it's just gone up and up and up and up. And you've got that, and then just how wide they are with the big front wings, the big rear wings as well. And they look amazing. Like, they look so cool. These are the fastest cars in F1 history, and that's mega. And you put them around Silverstone or Spa, and it's like brilliant. It's absolute fever. That's really what you want. But then you put them to a track like Spain, where it's like you've really got to work to get an overtake in. Similar to Monaco, but obviously Monaco's a street circuit. So, and I know obviously your beef with Monaco, we won't go down that rabbit hole. But it's like it's the same issue where if you've got the cars that are too wide, they just can't get ahead. They can't make a move. They can't pass, and that is really a big problem in Spain. Like, ultimately, you want cars that are very easy to follow each other, and we know that's going to be a fix coming with the 2022 regulations, which is very, very welcome, and that's like what F1 has been craving for a long, long time. But just with these cars as they are right now, the amount of, as you say, the wake that is kicked off the rear of each car means it's so hard to follow, and therefore it's just like, well, they just can't make an overtake basically. So yeah, it's the cars are definitely an issue that do contribute to this, because they're not easy to race each other. And then I think Spain is probably one of the worst tracks on the calendar to really expose that. But again, if you could argue that if the cars were better and really shouldn't have cars that only work on certain circuits, it should be any kind of track, particularly Spain, where they do so much pre-season running as well. It's like, well, why don't they work around here?
Now, the point you just made about testing is a good point, which I think we're going to come to onto a little bit later, as to why it's maybe neither the cars nor the track, but just as the circumstances of Formula One. But we have another piece of audio in through from RUAIRI, who makes a good point about maybe it is the Formula One that's the problem.
I think personally for me, with the whole situation, you know, with the cars that we have now in Formula One since 2017, it is really, really hard, you know, to have that much overtaking, you know, now in Formula One. But at the same time, if you look like in Formula 2 and how their races came about, you know, last weekend, you see drivers like Mobaha Matsushita, who won the race from starting right at the back and still won the race in feature race. So in that sense, for me, I think the Spanish Grand Prix should still be on the calendar. But at the same time, hopefully, when the 2022 regulations come about, we will still get, you know, better racing, you know, especially around Barcelona. But, you know, until then it's going to be one of those, no offense to Barcelona, one of the more bored fests of the races with these current crop of cars right now.
And again, I feel like what RUAIRI's talking about is not just a Spain problem. It's been something that's followed Formula One for, as we've said, years now, is that the feeder series seem to provide great racing on tracks where Formula One is actually pretty dull. I guess Yas Marina circuit would be another example where the F2 and F3 and GP3 before that have all been really actually quite exciting around that track and have given us good races. Not all the time, but maybe a little bit more so than its Big Brother series. And again, that's mainly to do with as we were touching on before, the difference in the aero regulations that Formula One has.
Yeah, definitely, yeah, because those, I mean, spec series, they are basically, so everyone's in the same car, therefore it's like really easy to follow, really easy to sort of get close to other cars and attempt these overtakes. And that's what obviously you want to teach the younger drivers, like to be able to go for these moves and I think really like fight wheel to wheel and have that opportunity. And then it must be quite interesting when they kind of do that all the way through their junior career and then get up to F1 and be like, oh, right, now I need like a massive tyre delta or like a really big advantage in terms of outright car pace or something to even get close to the car ahead. And I mean, Romain Grosjean, he touched on talking about it over the weekend, saying that you need a 1.4 second delta on the car ahead of you to go for an overtake, which is just like insane. Like you don't get that even with a step in tyre compounds, really. That's something we saw towards the end of the race last weekend as well with Sebastian Vettel. I mean, his soft tyres were absolutely shot to bits, and he did this amazing one-stop strategy that he deserves all the credit for, even if the planning was a little bit problematic, let's say, maybe.
Didn't make it easy for him, did they?
No, but he made that work. And even though he had Alex Albon behind him on fresher tyres with a quicker car, and Albon just couldn't get close, basically. And it's like, you need these cars to be better to follow each other, because the feeder series show that, yeah, you can have good races at this track. So therefore that kind of does point to it being more of a car issue than perhaps a track issue. But obviously it's more complex than that.
Far more complex. At Yamnissus on Instagram said, Barcelona is an awesome track. MotoGP is awesome there. F1 is just too big. So again, other series, other motorsports, and actually at M_Perrot on Instagram said, no track is a bad track, but not every track is suitable for every motorsport. And maybe that is, it's kind of, there's the argument that and this is something actually that I've said in the past, and maybe I'll be convinced otherwise, but I do think that if F1 is going to continue to go to tracks, historic tracks that it has, which I am a big fan on, because I think we've got some absolutely amazing tracks out there, and I guess this year has given us a bit of a taster of tracks of the good old days, with the return of Imola and the Nürburgring, and tracks that really made F1 fans excited and you know, deserved their place in F1 history, that are coming back. So that's an awesome thing. But the F1 or the FIA, surely, if we're going to return to these tracks and F1 is going to evolve, the car should be designed to be able to race around those tracks, surely, right? Unless we're going to be constantly building new tracks, which, you know, what's the most recent track that's been built? I guess unless you're a street track like a Baku, where you just kind of appear out of nowhere, like a purpose-built racetrack. What, Yas Marina is probably the most recent, and what, we're on year 12 of that. So, you know, it's not like we're building a new track every year, and so. Is there an argument there that surely F1 and the FIA should be designing cars that are fit for the racetracks that we race on?
Yeah, 100%, because you shouldn't be designing a track to the current spec of cars, because that spec of cars is going to change every, I guess, well, what? We had these new cars came in 2017, and they'll be gone by 2022, so 5 years. A racetrack is built to last longer than 5 years. Like, it's meant to be a real long-term project, and you want it to stand the test of time. And like we celebrated 70 years of Silverstone at the Grand Prix a couple of weeks back, you want to be doing that with all of these circuits. Really, that's the whole point of it. So it should be that they can build this track and say, look, it's maybe not absolutely perfect for the current crop of cars, but it's flexible and it will always produce pretty good racing no matter what the car spec is, and that's how it should be. It shouldn't be that they're designed basically for, like, you shouldn't have like a super wide circuit that is like great for these big cars, but then when you go to a smaller model it's like, well, it's not very good. So there should be that flexibility, and obviously that's a challenge that track designers such as Herman Tilke, I guess, they always like try and grapple with and try
he
and sort
gets it
of,
in the neck,
he
doesn't
does,
he?
yeah, the Tilkedromes, and it's like, and they really do their best, and I guess even he sort of said, well, look, this is what we're dealing with right now. This is how the cars are. And yeah, it doesn't always work. And it's like, well, ultimately, yeah, you want the tracks to be able to suit all kinds of cars. And as you said with the classic tracks, like Mugello, that I don't think will be very good for F1 racing.
No,
like, the qualifying will be mega, and bikes around there are absolutely brilliant.
Yep.
But actual racing, I'm a bit like, not so sure. And again, like that, but when we go there shouldn't be that surprise. Like, nobody should be surprised when Mugello's like a really crap race.
I do think everyone's going to be disappointed though,
Big
because
time.
it's been really hyped. I think it was going to be the case had we gone to Zandvoort. Again, it's another one where it's this amazing classic track that has had some absolutely epic racing around there, but these modern F1 cars are not going to deliver on the same thing. Like, Mugello is genuinely probably one of the most beautiful tracks I've ever seen, and I've been very lucky to go there for MotoGP. And for MotoGP, you're right, it's great. I mean, it's really challenging for MotoGP, and I agree with you. Saturday in Mugello is going to be insane, and I can't wait to see the footage, the pictures. All of that is going to be amazing. But come race day, I hope I'm like disappointed. Or no, sorry, I hope I'm not disappointed. I hope that I'm proved wrong. But yeah, I just don't. It is just this whole weird way that we've got, and I guess that's the hope, that is the 2022 regulations are going to come in and help a lot with that, and maybe we'll get some better racing off the back of it. But yeah, just can't help thinking that surely it's a no-brainer that we should be designing cars with our tracks in mind.
Yeah, 100%. You want them to be flexible, you want it to be workable anywhere, and that we could have a situation in the future where it's like, oh, right, we need to cobble together a calendar, what tracks have we got, and go to Mugello, Imola, Turkey, without any reservations or any concerns about how the cars will go there, because the sport is that flexible enough that they'll work anywhere.
Is that possible, though?
That's a question for people probably far beyond my pay grade who probably know what they're on about. But it's yeah, obviously that is the challenge. And F1, they would have never, even with these current cars, have gone, oh, we want to make it like, we want them to be super wide and everything. They were just like, we want them to be fast. We want them to be like far more aero dependent than they were in the past. And that's what they did. And it's about striking that sort of fine balance and happy medium. And the noises coming out about the 22 regs, they seem pretty positive. Let's see whether it sort of reflects in the on-track products at the end of it.
It's just such a shame that we have to wait another year for it, because yeah, it doesn't help. It doesn't help with, especially when new fans are getting into the sport. As I said, I genuinely think 2020 so far, although it does seem to be a Mercedes fest, we've had some brilliant races. So it's kind of a shame. Like maybe it's the whole, you know, F1 fans are never satisfied. We always want more. We always want, you know, Austria round one for every single race, and that's just, I don't know. Maybe we're just asking too much. But I guess, you know, because the other thing as well is that everyone always brings up football as a comparison for F1, which I'm always a bit funny about, because they could not be more different if they tried in terms of as sports. But you know, we watch boring football races, and no one really bats an eyelid. Football races. I've just invented a hybrid sport. I mean, I'd watch football racing.
I would, yeah, that'd be interesting.
I don't know how would that work.
Well, yeah, like Top Gear did it with like the car football, didn't they?
Oh yeah.
Do that.
Mean, that's less racing, but I mean, yeah, okay. Anyway. It's been a long morning. We get boring football matches. Yeah. And no idea why you're smiling, Luke. We get boring football matches, and yeah, okay, people might go, oh, that was boring. But I feel like F1 gets it in the neck more. Like, are fans just a bit more, I don't know, like less easy to please?
I think so, but also you got to remember that with F1 we have 20 races a year, give or take. With football, like if you're watching 0-0, it's fine because there's another match next weekend or the day after.
Or
whatever.
There's been 5 matches that day.
Yeah, exactly. So you're probably gonna get something interesting. Whereas with F1, it's like, I mean, I think of like the season open in Australia, last year, for example, you have that long wait over the winter, all the hype and like build up and everything like that, and it's just a bit of a boring race. You're a bit like, oh, like I got up at 5 AM for this. Like,
oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Please, can we move Melbourne from the start of the calendar? I don't mind it as a track, but as a season opener, you're right. Like, I mean, I know people all around the world, every single race are having to wake up at 5 AM, so maybe I should get out my world's smallest violin. But yeah, there are tracks on the calendar that just seem to have this bit of a problem. Yeah. But okay, let's move away from the cars then, because obviously on the flip side is the track is just not fit for purpose, right? So why is it still on the calendar? If it's not gonna deliver, then and we have boring races. That's a kind of a fact that we maybe just have to accept as F1 fans. But let's hear from NTS Paradise, who makes some really valid points here.
So simply, I don't agree with what he said, because about 15 years ago, during the refueling era, we had less wide cars. The cars were more narrow. And we still had very few overtakes. We had only one overtake in 1999. The cars were not 2 meters wide. They were 1 meter and 80 centimeters wide, and still very few overtakes. 2002, same, 2 overtakes. 2004, 2 overtakes. 2005, 1 overtake. Only one overtake. In 2006, Kimi Räikkönen said that he wanted to have radio on his car, but music, because if very boring. He wanted music on his car because he felt like the race was very, very boring. I watched the 2008 Spanish Grand Prix, and that was the same problem. Only 2 overtakes, and they were done by a Toyota on a Super Aguri and a 4-cylinder. So it only happened when the car behind was very, very much faster than the car ahead. The problem is with the track. It's not with the 2-meter wide cars. And with his opinion about tire management and PU management, in 2002, 1999, etc., there was no such issues, and still the overtaking was very, very rare. I think the issue is with the track. It's always been a problem there.
Right, NTS Paradise with the receipts. He's
Yes.
got the receipts.
Yeah, he does.
He's got evidence. He's like, 1999, 2002, 2008, what you got? 2006, Kimmy on the radio. Guy's done his homework. I really like that. Thank you so much for sending that in on Instagram. But yeah, I mean, the man's got a point, right?
Yeah.
I think of all the tracks that we've got that we maybe go, oh, that's a dull race, even I will concede. Oh, sorry, I'm hitting my microphone. Even I will concede that Monaco has delivered good racing. Whoa. And that's a track that I would rather see off the cards based on modern Formula One or today's Formula One. But can you name a decent Spanish Grand Prix?
This is it. Like, if anyone has any answers to this, please let us know.
Let us know.
We want to know. But like, because no, like, I really can't think of the last Spanish Grand Prix that was like super exciting and had loads of like close wheel-to-wheel racing or anything like that. And if it were purely down to the cars, then surely like before 2017 there'd have been really good Spanish Grand Prix, but there weren't. And it is literally through every reg cycle, as he said, that there is always this recurring problem that we have no overtaking around Spain. It's a boring race, and you don't always need overtakes to make a race exciting.
Yeah.
Like, you can have sort of cars following closely and stuff like that, and that's great. I mean, MotoGP is a great example of that. But I mean, there's just none of that. Like, even when you had F1's craziest moment with Pastor Maldonado winning a race in Spain.
What a man.
Incredible.
What
Absolutely
a driver.
incredible.
Freaking goat.
And that was all down to strategy. And it was a great strategy play, don't get me wrong, and the battle between him and Alonso was interesting, but it wasn't exciting. And even Max Verstappen's win, we were talking about before we recorded this, that was an exciting race because you had the two Mercs taking each other out and Verstappen winning on debut for Red Bull, youngest ever F1 winner. But he got into that position because of a strategy fumble by Ricciardo and one of the Ferraris that got him into first place. And then it was just this train of 4 cars just going through for the last like 20 laps. It was a bit like I don't know. Like, you want to see them fighting. You want to see them probably going wheel to wheel. And like I really can't think of a good Spanish Grand Prix that we've had there. Like, you always kind of just get through the weekend and go, okay, we'll on to the next one, which is normally Monaco. So it's like back-to-back 2 races in a row that could offer very, very few overtakes.
Yeah, it's such a shame. So why don't we go into why Spain is a bad track? And we're going to kick off with a message from Stevie.
Hey Jess, in reference to Catalunya, I think it's a shit track and has been for a while now for F1, unfortunately. For me, I feel like the main part is that last chicane. I would love to know who that last chicane is good for. I just feel like it kills all momentum down the front straightaway, and even faster cars that should be passing slower cars with DRS seem to struggle. And in my opinion, passing down the front straightaway leads to a little bit more excitement in turns 1, 2, and 3, but I feel like we just don't have that. And even, I think Crofty said on Sunday, the stats show that track position at Catalunya is more important than Monaco, which I think is just nuts. So, yeah, I would love to see some racing somewhere else versus Catalunya. Thanks for what you do, Jess.
Track position more important than Monaco on a racetrack.
Not streets.
Not narrow, higgledy-piggledy streets of Monaco.
Yeah.
A full-blown racetrack. Now, that's not something we really want. And Stevie raised the issue of the final chicane. Now, that was something that was introduced because they were worried about the speeds that drivers were taking through the corners. Yeah. What is it about the final chicane that people seem to have a problem with?
Well, as Stevie said, it just kills all momentum that you have. And, like, previously you'd have that heavy braking zone into turn 10, and then you start your final sector, you come up the hill, and then you sort of take you take that sort of swooping right-hander, and then you have two really fast like final two corners, and it's great. And then basically if someone has made a little mistake, had a little bit of a wiggle coming out of one of those, the guy behind would be right on his tail, ready to make a pass, and that'd be great. But now you've got this chicane, and it just doesn't, it bunches everyone up, it gets them all slow, and then they just all launch off together, and it's like there's not really much room for error, to be honest. So it just does kill that momentum, make things so much slower as they come back onto the main straight. And then even with DRS, like they may not be able to get close enough, and it's just like that is such a big issue, because you want them to have that momentum, you want them to be going quickly. And I know lap times, like I think they've gained something like 10 seconds since 2014 when we first had the hybrids, which is great. Yeah, it's really cool. And we're into sort of like, I think it was like 1 minute 15 for pole or something. But I mean, you take out that chicane and we could be into like well under the 110s range, and it would be a seriously quick track, and that's pretty exciting. And it is a real shame, particularly with these modern cars with so much downforce, that you don't have them really pinning it around those final two corners and then coming onto the main straight and hopefully getting close enough to the car ahead to go for an overtake. So that in itself is an issue. And then you also look at some of the other corners that have always been there. I mean, turn 3 and turn 9, now they're really challenging corners because they're high speed, and for quite a high downforce track, that's nice to have that kind of variation in there. But it is so hard to follow other cars. Like they're sort of going around. If you're in the wake of someone else's, if you're in the wake of a car, it's really, really hard to get close. And the issue is that, particularly through turn 9, for example, even though they can take that flat now in these cars, which is really, really cool, the amount of downforce that you lose being stuck behind a car means that by the time you get to turn 10 and the next overtaking opportunity, you're too far back. Like you just can't get close enough. So it is a real issue just in terms of the layout of the circuit. But I think the chicane is probably the biggest culprit of all the changes that have been made there. And
it's not like we don't change circuit layouts, right? Silverstone has gone through various iterations, and multiple other tracks have had kind of additions added or bits taken away or bits changed. Spain has had the final chicane added in. So what would you do? What would you do to fix the circuit? I mean, maybe that's a bigger question that maybe we'll cover in a video dedicated to redesigning the Spanish Grand Prix circuit. But do you think you would get rid of the final chicane?
I would get rid of the final chicane, and then I would probably sharpen turn 1, so it's like a proper braking zone, and like not quite a hairpin, but like a really heavy braking zone. So like you want that to be like a second gear corner, where at the moment it's like you could probably take that in 3rd and 4th, or I imagine.
Geez, 4th, turn 1, really?
That's at least on my limited experience on the F1 video game, but I don't know. That doesn't count.
When I was doing it on the F1 game, I was in 4th gear. That's crazy though for a turn 1.
Yeah, so it's to be like even in 3rd is like it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you want to make that more of a braking zone, a bit more like turn 10. So I think that is a decent corner basically where you should get some overtaking, but you just don't. And then just make it so that you don't have these high speed corners where they lose ground on the car in front because of the dirty air coming off, that then lead into the only overtaking opportunities. You want to keep them close, or you want to bring those opportunities closer so they don't lose ground in the first place. So yeah, it's something they've got to weigh up. I mean, it's a track that we know in terms of funding has been struggling. So obviously I think for them to say, look, we want this changed and that changed and that changed, that's maybe a bit of a big ask. But I think that, yeah, it's just, if we want better racing there, I think there does need to be some kind of thinking, look, what tweaks can we maybe make?
Now, earlier on we touched on the fact that we do a lot of testing at Barcelona, obviously. So these drivers know this track like the back of their hand. The teams know this track like the back of their hand. They're basing their entire season on setups and everything on this track. So I've got an opinion from Lumberjack Mag, which is a great username, as to why testing might be a bit of a culprit, as well as to why the Spanish Grand Prix is boring.
Yeah, trouble with Barcelona is all the years and laps they've spent pounding around that circuit testing. In my opinion, you shouldn't race at some of your tests because it only produces these sort of races, and it's been the same for years and years and years. Yeah, that's my opinion. It's nothing to do with the cars. It's been like that for years, and it's because of the laps they do.
Now, is that a problem? The fact that they do all these laps? Or, I mean, should it not really matter? I mean, one year we had snow in Barcelona, you know, it was kind of like all weather testing. But I mean, I guess that must have a hand slightly. But I don't know if it actually makes the fundamental difference in as much as the cars versus the track layout would have on a Grand Prix.
Yeah, definitely, because I mean, it does. The amount of data they all have going into the Spanish Grand Prix is obviously absolutely enormous compared to any other track because of all the testing you do there. I mean, a couple of years ago, I think I worked out I spent like 2 weeks of my life each year at that track through testing the Grand Prix and then post-race testing. So like they do all these laps and they have all this data, and like, that's a huge bulk, but the cars change so much, and even with compared to pre-season testing, for example, Alex Albon, who's had a bit of a tricky start to the year, he was asked after the weekend, like, well, you had pre-season testing here in this RB16 car. Do you feel a bit more comfortable coming back to a track that you know? And he said, well, the car's changed so much since then, so therefore it's not all the references have changed anyway. So I don't think the amount of testing, I don't think that really does make it so much of a problem, to be honest, because it's the same with any track. Like, even if they don't do testing there, the teams have this big bank of data. They know these tracks inside out, and it really is just a case of, right, how is our car in its current spec with all the updates and anything else on it? How is that working on the circuit now? I think it's maybe a bit easy to just say, oh, it's just because we do loads of testing there. It's a valid point, and it would be quite cool to see some like different circuits come on for testing, or that we did testing in Barcelona and then just like do racing elsewhere, for example. But yeah, I think that an extra sort of 6 days there, I don't think that does a huge amount of harm in terms of that won't cause us to have bad racing as we do.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I do like Lumberjack Mac. I do like the idea of us testing somewhere else, like somewhere like a Jerez, or test at Barcelona. Bring Jerez back. I don't know if you agree with that. Let us know in the comments or tweet us. Okay, so let's get down to it. Is it just ALDAS who thinks that it's the cars, not the circuit?
I think it is just ALDAS, I'm afraid. I think it is, yeah. I think that the fact that we have had so many issues with this track for so many years, that it isn't just this current iteration of cars that gives us boring races in Barcelona. As NTS Paradise so wonderfully summed up for us, you've got all of these years where you go, that was a bad race, that was a bad race, that was a bad race. And really you don't have that with a lot of other tracks. Like even Abu Dhabi, for example, which is a bit of a snoozer normally to close out the year, but you can point to some races there that have been brilliant. I mean, I think of 2012, for example, when you have Vettel's fight back through the field, you had Kimi's great radio message, and like that, it does produce some good racing on occasion, and like there are at least sort of big memorable moments that happen there. But with Spain, like it's just never. I don't know, there's just nothing about the track that you don't think, oh, it's Spanish Grand Prix this weekend. Like I'm really excited for that, and it is obviously important to a lot of people. Carlos Sainz, Fernando Alonso, to have that sort of that home Grand Prix for them is massively important, and I think they'll be doing everything they can to try and keep it on the calendar for the long term now. But in terms of its actual suitability to F1, I think that the same questions keep being asked time and time again, and that's really a reflection of the track and not the cars.
And I guess especially when we've got places like Istanbul that might be returning, we've got the talks about that happening at the moment. You know, it's just like, does Spain deserve its place? If it's not going to deliver, and obviously F1 is ultimately an entertainment brand, right? It's an entertainment sport, and we want to see good racing. And if you're not going to deliver, I mean, we've given Spain enough shots, haven't we? Really?
Yeah.
We've given them enough races to prove that it's not just the cars. It's not just the track, and it is another reason. So I think I'm inclined to agree. I definitely have been, I'm in favour of the 2022 regulations. The cars definitely do need to change, but I think in the case of Spain, more blame lies with the track. So if we were looking at it as a racing incident, I think more blame needs to be applied to the circuit Barcelona to Catalonia, unfortunately. But what do you guys think at home? Let us know in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. If you are listening on your podcast player, make sure you tweet either myself or Luke. That's at LukeSmithF1 and at JessMcF1 or at Autosport, and we'll get back to you with what we think about what you think of the Spanish Grand Prix. But until next time, thanks ever so much for everybody for sending in your opinions and being part of the show. Make sure you're checking out our social channels at Autosport for the next instalment and the next question where we need you to submit your opinions. And until next time, we'll see you then.